Right. Welcome, everyone. If you'd like to go ahead and get into a comfortable seating posture. Hmm. As we begin this meditation, just taking a minute or two to come into presence. We spend much of our day pulled about by various wants and desires, and you probably can't let them fully go, but just to whatever extent feels possible to you. Just come into this present moment and let those worries kind of recede into the background. Just being here with this body of ours. Noticing any tension or agitation, any peace or pleasant feelings. Just noticing the body as it's here. We might give ourselves the gift of a few deep breaths. And really letting go on the exhale. Just following that natural relaxation. In your own time, letting that go. And taking a moment to check in with the mind as well. Just noticing any patterns, any habitual thoughts, any directions the mind is moving in. Just noting, just kind of getting a lay of the land. And once we have a feel for what's going on in the body and the mind, we might let attention rest on the breath. Simply observing. However the breathing is occurring is okay. It doesn't need to be changed or fixed. You don't need to be breathing slowly or quickly. Just notice. How is this breath showing up in this moment? Following the in-breath and following the out-breath. Just being aware of this never-ending cycle. Breathing in Breathing out. And perhaps there's a soothing, rhythmic quality to the breath. Perhaps it's pulling you deeper and deeper into relaxation. In breath and out breath. It just sort of happens on its own. You don't need to try and breathe. It's just breathing. And so perhaps you can let go of any efforting around the breath, knowing that you're safe. The breath will happen on its own. And when the mind gets lost in thought, returning to the anchor, to the breath, and doing so with gentleness. There's no reason to be upset or self-critical. The mind is built to wander around. Let's come back to the breath with kindness. And as attention rests on the breath, you might notice that the breath has a quality of aliveness to it, vibrance, movement. It's always in motion, even in those 2 points of time between the in-breath and out-breath, the out-breath and in-breath. And still feel the reverberations of the breath throughout the body. See if you can notice that quality. How clearly can you perceive this living, moving breath? How fully can you receive it? You might let attention expand a bit to encompass the whole body. You might notice there are other sources of aliveness in the body. You might notice the body itself moving in time with the breath, the head rocking back and forth, the hands and arms shifting positions in time with the in-breath and out-breath, changing of the weight distribution of the body, shifting the hips and thighs. You might let those be known as well, just receiving them into awareness. You need to change them or make them appear in any certain way. Just notice the aliveness of the body. You might also notice any involuntary movements like shivering or twitching. Allow those to be known in awareness as well. Perhaps you can also notice the pulse. Sometimes it gets quite subtle. You might feel it in the earlobes, in the neck, along the carotid, perhaps in the tips of your fingers, or in your heart center. And let that be known in awareness as well. Perhaps there's some feeling of the digestive system. Maybe you just ate, or maybe you haven't eaten in a while. Perhaps the stomach is making some kind of noise about this. That can be known as well. Just let it appear in awareness. There might be some swallowing or slight movements of the tongue. Just holding all of these in awareness. Just letting the aliveness of this body be known. Just resting in the aliveness of this body of yours. This is what it's like to be a living being, full of motion and change, energy. Just feeling that's like. As we sit here, resting in this experience of being a living being, however it's showing up for you, there's a truth that I'd like you to bring to mind. Right now, in this moment, you are experiencing being a living being, but at some point in the future, you will not. You might take note of what arises. If it becomes too uncomfortable to be with what's there, please feel very free to return to the breath or to do metta. And if it feels okay, you might let that truth remain present. Is there fear for the future? Or is there gratitude for the present? There's some of both. maybe something else. Just notice what comes up, where the mind goes. In this last minute, just taking some time to receive my gratitude, your presence here and your practice, reflecting on how that makes your lives better. Reflecting too on how your practice spreads to those around you and makes their lives better as well. Hey, Perna. Hi, Charlesley. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. There's a Sangha brunch on the 15th at 11 a.m. for you local folks. Anybody who's interested is welcome to come. Just please let me know. There's also, some of you folks may have seen this, but Dhammadeepa has put up a lot of her schedule for the fall on the website. So there's a few retreats and classes and stuff if you're interested in doing more of that this summer and this fall. So before we start tonight, I feel like I would like to give a little caveat to my talk. I'm, I'm, I'm a little mindful that this is a difficult subject, and I don't intend to be, I don't intend this to be especially difficult, but in case this gets difficult for people, I just wanted to give the caveat that it's okay to just let the words be sound and not really engage with them. If you feel called to, you can just go into the body and meditate on the breath, and that's a helpful thing to do. I don't expect it'll be too difficult, but just in case. So when I'm at work, I often find that I need a break, and one of the things that I do is we'll often go out for a walk. So I was doing this last week, and I was walking. There's a group of cemeteries near my office. There's like 6 of them, kind of all put together. It's a really nice place to walk, and I was walking there last week, and as I walk through the cemetery, what often happens is the mind goes off into story. I don't know any of these people, but like the mind has kind of clues to what their life might have been like. There's names and there's birth dates, and um, the mind might start to tell stories about like this person lived full life, and this person lived a short life, and um, this person lived in the 1800s, and perhaps their life was like that, and things like there's a few places in the cemetery where you see the grave of parents, aside graves of children, and notice that the children passed before the parents, and there's some kind of sad stories about that sometimes. But as I was walking the other day, I had the thought that this lens of story is a really good way to understand death and to come to grips with death. That's kind of where I want to go today. The reason for this is that death is what makes the story. If our lives didn't have any end, there would be no kind of narrative arc to it. Death is what gives life meaning. Death is what makes this moment that we're in now, precious. We don't tend to see life as something precious, like life in this moment. The analogy that I think is helpful here is that, how much time today have you spent thinking about the air you breathe? Right? Probably not very much. That's because it's kind of functionally infinite, right? And so we don't really pay much attention to it. It's not really worth much to us until we can't breathe, until we're choking or we're drowning or something like that. Then it becomes very, very precious. This is what's true of life as well. For the most part, we don't really see the value, but when we can see the value, it becomes very precious. And the thing that helps us see the value is understanding death, understanding our mortality. When we do this, when we see our the truth of our death, uh, life becomes precious, and we want to use it well. So I'm going to read a bit from Anguttara Nikaya 557. This is a sutta on the 5 daily recollections, which some of you guys have heard of, but it's the 5 daily recollections are 5 things that it's helpful to bring to mind to remind yourself of. And so this is the sutta. It says, mendicants, a woman or man, a layperson or a renunciate should often review these 5 subjects. Which 5? Number 1, I am liable to grow old. I am not exempt from old age. A woman or a man, a layperson or a renunciate should often review this. Number 2, I am liable to get sick. I am not exempt from sickness. Number 3, I am liable to die. I am not exempt from death. Number 4, I must be parted and separated from all I hold dear and beloved. And number 5, I am the owner of my deeds and heir to my deeds. Deeds are my womb, my relative, and my refuge. I shall be heir of whatever deeds I do, whether good or bad. A woman or man, a layperson or renunciate, should often review these. And skipping forward a little bit, Buddha says, what is the advantage of often reviewing this? I am liable to die. I am not exempt from death. There are sentient beings who, drunk on the vanity of life, do bad things by way of body, speech, and mind. Reviewing this subject often, they entirely give up the vanity of life, or at least reduce it. This is the advantage of often reviewing this statement. I am liable to die. I am not exempt from death. So this is why we want to understand the truth of our death. When we don't, we kind of fritter this life away. We spend it on things that we wouldn't otherwise if we valued it properly. When life is precious, we tend not to waste it. This is not the way we normally live. We don't normally live the truth that we're going to die. Like we know this intellectually. I don't think anybody would disagree with the fact that you're going to die, but it's not felt on an unconscious level. It's not a truth that's behind the decisions we make. There's a German word, I think, that will help here. I'll try and pronounce it. It's Weltanschauung. It's kind of translated as worldview, but the connotation here is that it's a worldview from a particular point of view. So our worldview, our Weltanschauung, tends to be that we like death is off to the side, so we don't really see that part. So our life tends to not have that tends to not have that truth in it. So we effectively think that we're going to live forever. It's not intellectually, but that's the way we live. But we know this is not true. You are of the nature to die, as the Buddha said. That which arises is of the nature to pass away. This is the truth of the matter, and you will come to this knowledge one way or the other. You can come to it with some semblance of ease, some gradualness through practice, or you can be dragged kicking and screaming into this truth by life. It can happen now, it can happen in the future, or it can happen at the end of your life on your deathbed, but you are of the nature to die, and at one point this truth will become clear to you. And this is a hard truth to see. It's probably the hardest truth to see from the Dharma. It's hard because all the plans and wants and all the relationships we like that we want to continue, all that stuff involves us being alive. And when we accept our death, you necessarily have to accept the reality that all these plans, all these ways we want to shape the world, all these people we want to be with, we don't necessarily get those things. And, that's part of accepting your death. I think the other reason why it's hard is because when death is this great unknown. Like we think that we have some knowledge about what our life is going to be like in the next moment or next day or next year, but of course we really don't. But we think that we don't know what's going to happen at death, and that's it's completely understandable why that causes fear in us, and so it's hard for us to see. Buddhism is often kind of described as preparation for death. And that statement works in different ways. But like in this context here, we sit and we do our practice and we see the truth of the world, including the fact that we are going to die. There's different gateways into this, but some of them are you sit and you notice that all the phenomena that arise are of the nature to pass away. And you sit and you keep seeing this and you keep seeing this. And when all the kind of fluff about, worrying about what's going to happen at work tomorrow and, wanting some food to eat and all that fluff kind of goes away, and the contents of the mind are seen clearly, then you can see that all the stuff, including the stuff that feels like me, that too is of the nature to pass away. You can also see the sense of self die in a kind of more direct way. We tend to think of the sense of self as like one monolithic thing, but there's another way you can see it. It's just these kind of flickers of little selves that get spun up every time you want something or you have aversion towards something. And so in practice, we can learn to see those, and we can learn to see that sense of self get born. We can also learn to see that sense of self die. I had a pretty memorable experience of this it was the last time I was on long retreat, but it's on some long retreat. And there's this period of time in retreat, it's at least a month, maybe like 6 weeks, where I was working with this one particular species of craving. That was pretty much all the mind wanted to do, to to work with that. And this craving at one point was seen through, but it kept arising, and it was kind of deep into retreat, so I was quite present, and I would sit, and sometimes my whole sit would be consumed by this pattern, repeating over and over, the craving arising, and then the sense of self around that craving, like flickering into existence and dying as soon as it was born. The mind was so present, there was no way for it to hold on. So I just had these like many thousands and thousands of experiences of this sense of self dying. And so this is one way we can prepare for death. There's also another way. I spoke just a moment ago about the fear around the unknown, being a barrier to seeing the truth of death. And at some point in everyone's practice, you walk right up to that unknown, and you see that directly, and you have a choice. I can jump right into this unknown, or I can go back to my old way of seeing things, my normal way of seeing the world, being this separate sense of self. I don't know how it works for most folks, but maybe some people just jump right in on the first time, but maybe it takes you a few times too, going up to that point and being scared and running away, and then sometime later you come back to that point of the unknown again. But at some point, everybody jumps right into that that unknown, that letting go of the sense of self. And this is a very real death. It's not a death of the body, it's a death of the ego. It's a death of the self construct. So it's not that you die, but it's that you see the truth that the thing you think you are is an illusion. So you have to accept the death of that thing. It's very real. It's not a death of the body, but it's a very real death. So this truth is hard to see, but practice, our sitting practice, is this preparation for death that helps us accept this truth. And so for a practitioner who's practiced for some time and has had made some progress in this, when they're facing the death of the body, they've already experienced the death of the ego, or perhaps some amount of death of the ego. So their passage, I haven't died, but I think their passage becomes much easier. Because really, that's what the mind is worried about. The mind is not actually worried about the body. The mind is worried about the ego construct. And of course, that we tend to identify the body with the ego construct, but it's really worried about the ego, and the ego is what you can see through in practice. So when we see our death, this is what gives our story meaning. It's what gives our life kind of flavor to it. It's what changes this series of moments from being just kind of meaningless grains of sand into these precious jewels that we really care for and really want to use well. We can see this truth now, or perhaps some future point in our practice, or we can see it at the end of our life on our deathbed. And the thing with that is that if we wait until our deathbed to see this truth, I wouldn't say like anybody who does that wastes their life or anything, but you live life like half asleep. You're not fully woken up to the true value of what this life can be, which is kind of a shame. These lives we have are just, they're wonderful. We can do so much with them, and they can be such a gift to the world. We can give so much, or we cannot. So I guess I've been talking about seeing death as this kind of binary thing. You see it or you don't see it, but it's maybe a little more nuanced than that. Um, we can talk about seeing death at the level of the identity. So at the seeing the death of this being who thinks they are a person with characteristics, and you have a profession and you have plans for the world, and these kind of defining features. You can talk about seeing death at the level of a being who has who owns their likes and dislikes. And finally, at the very kind of deepest level, you can talk about seeing death at the level of this being that has some form of attachment to existence, the very kind of deepest level. And when you do this, when you kind of go down this, when you see death at these deeper levels, your life kind of opens up. When you see death at the level of a being who has an identity, you can connect to folks without the identity being a kind of barrier. So you can connect to folks regardless of their political persuasion or their skin color or their whatever they do with their life or their social class or any of this like stories that we tell about ourselves. So you can have a much richer and fuller life, and give that connection to other folks too. And when you see death at the level of this being with likes and dislikes, what you find is that you don't need to hold yourself away from the world. You don't need to like run away from the unpleasant and run towards the pleasant. You can just be with the world. When you see death at the level of a being who's attached to existence, that's the end. I think there's nothing keeping what feels like you apart from what feels like not you, and it's just there's no separation. So as we progress on this journey of seeing death at deeper and deeper levels, that becomes more poignant and more beautiful. There's less desire for any kind of pettiness, I guess. You're just like filling the life with no judgment. I fill my life with kind of dumb stuff too, but like it becomes more meaningful. You want to do useful and valuable things with your time, things that bring happiness and love to others. You want to be more present with what is this precious moment that doesn't come anymore. You get this moment once, and you only get a finite number of moments. You don't have time to waste. You see life for what it is, a gift. There's a teacher I like who says this really well, and he says that you did nothing to deserve your life. And he's not saying that you don't deserve your life. He's saying that you did nothing to deserve it. It was just given to you. This like greatest gift that you could possibly get. It's just given to you. You didn't earn it by being a good person yesterday. You didn't. There's no strings attached. You're just given this gift. And when you understand death, you can see life that way. There's no room for anger or hatred or greed or anything of ugliness. You just want to use your precious finite moments well. I know we've all had the experience of having the idea that it would be good to do something and then putting it off for tomorrow. We've all had the experience of getting up in the morning and just saying, I have so much work to do today. I can't possibly say it. I'll do that tomorrow. I know we've had the experience of somebody doing something kind for us, or you just like appreciating somebody in our life and having the idea that I should really let them know, or thank them in some way, or tell them I love them or whatever, and then just kind of pushing it away. That's nice, but I got to go home and make dinner or whatever. We do that because we don't see the finite nature of our life. We do that because we think that we're going to live forever in some level. Yeah. Yeah. When we see this, we want to use these precious moments to make our life something of beauty. I think I'll end with the Maranasati Sutta. I think I'll probably paraphrase a bit of this. So Maranasati, the mindfulness of death. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Natika in the brick house. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants! Venerable sir, they replied. The Buddha said this, mendicants, when mindfulness of death is developed and cultivated, it's very fruitful and beneficial. It culminates in freedom from death and ends in freedom from death. But do you develop mindfulness of death? Sorry, I think that's, but how do you develop mindfulness of death? When he said this, one of the mendicants said to the Buddha, sir, I develop mindfulness of death. But mendicant, how do you develop it? In this case, sir, I think, oh, if I'd only live for another day and night, I'd focus on the Buddha's instructions and I could really achieve a lot. That's how I develop mindfulness of death. And so we ask another mendicant, and the mendicant says, in this case, sir, I think, if I'd only live for another day, I'd focus on the Buddha's instructions and I could really achieve a lot. That's how I develop mindfulness of death. A third mendicant says, oh, if I'd only live as long as it takes to eat a meal of alms food, I'd focus on the Buddha's instructions and I could really achieve a lot. That's how I develop mindfulness of death. Another mendicant, oh, if I'd only live as long as it takes to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls, I'd focus on the Buddha's instructions and I could really achieve a lot. That's how I develop mindfulness of death. Another mendicant, oh, if I'd only live as long as it takes to chew and swallow a single mouthful, I'd focus on the Buddha's instructions and I could really achieve a lot. That's how I develop mindfulness of death. And the last mendicant says, oh, if I'd only live as long as it takes to breathe out after breathing in, or to breathe in after breathing out, I'd focus on the Buddha's instructions and I could really achieve a lot. That's how I develop mindfulness of death. So to me, these seem like very dedicated practitioners. The Buddha has maybe a different take on things. So when this was said, the Buddha said to those mendicants, as to the mendicants who develop mindfulness of death by wishing to live for a day and a night, or to live for a day, or to live as long as it takes to eat a meal of alms food, or to live as long as it takes to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls, these are called mendicants who live negligently. They slackly develop mindfulness of death for the ending of defilements. But as to mendicants who develop mindfulness of death by wishing to live as long as it takes to chew and swallow a single mouthful, or to live as long as it takes to breathe out after breathing in, or to breathe in after breathing out, these are called mendicants who live diligently. They keenly develop mindfulness of death for the ending of defilements. And he closes with, so you should train like this. We will live diligently. We will keenly develop mindfulness of death for the ending of defilements. That's how you should train. So you are of the nature to die. You don't know when. Let that knowledge maybe lend some urgency to your practice. Thank you all.